Hello and welcome to another movie review here on HSG, and this particular flick, called Tau, a 2018 sci-fi thriller, is actually a movie which I had in my Netflix watch list for quite some time, and I just didn't get around to watching it. I'm sure you guys know how that is. You've got a film that you're thinking about watching, maybe a Blu-ray on the shelf that you bought some time, and you think, well, I'll get around to it eventually. And usually, when you do that, 9 times out of 10, you think, well, I could have probably carried on not seeing that, and I wouldn't have missed much. On this occasion, though, I am very glad that I decided to watch this one, because this is a great little flick. Now, it's only around an hour and a half or so long. You've got Maika Monroe as the primary character, who incidentally also starred in one of my favourite modern horror films, It Follows, with a fantastic soundtrack, one of the only movie soundtracks that I actually downloaded into iTunes. You've got Gary Oldman, no less, playing Tau, the artificial intelligence in the movie, and I was shocked to read that after I watched the film, because I've done voice acting in the past, and usually I'm pretty good at recognising voices, but I had no idea that it was Gary Oldman. So I don't know if they edited his voice or if he was just, I guess, acting in a different way, but great job, because I could not tell that it was him. Of course, there are always some people who will be down in the comments saying, oh, I know it was him immediately. Good for you. And then we've got Ed Skrein, or Ed Skrein, as the antagonist, if you will. A guy who certainly wouldn't consider himself to be a villain, and I'm not usually a fan of his, to be honest. He's the villain in Deadpool 1, for those who don't recognise his name. I found him kind of flat in that movie, and the only reason why that worked is because he was the antithesis to Ryan Reynolds' over-the-top charisma. That works for that movie, but he's pretty much always like that, and usually it falls flat for me. He's just kind of a brooding-looking, thinks he's tough-looking kind of character, and I guess that's why they cast him, but in this movie it kind of works, because he's playing a guy with a lot more hair than he usually has. He's usually got a buzz cut. He plays a very intelligent guy, a very successful guy, who is an inventor, if you will. Very high IQ, very intelligent, not particularly socially capable. Again, not too surprising. And he is, as I said, the antagonist. Now, the plot, without spoiling anything too specific, revolves around Maika Monroe being kidnapped by Ed Skrein and held in his home, along with a couple of other people as well, to do experiments on for his inventions. And basically he has a home butler, if you will, an integrated security system, which is this AI called Tau, played, as I said, by Gary Oldman. And basically this AI is everything from a cook to a cleaner to a security system to an entertainment system and even to a killing machine, if necessary, with this built-in kind of sentry bot design called Ares, of course referencing the god of war. A very large, sharp, triangular-looking robot, which kind of reminded me a little bit of the robot in Interstellar, although a little bit more fancy than that one, which is basically just a couple of Lego bricks in terms of its design. I really enjoyed this flick, and I don't understand why, but it has some really horrendous scores online. Rotten Tomatoes, of course, is not always a good gauge for movies due to the nature of it being an aggregator, but recently I've watched a couple of movies and I've completely agreed with their scores on Rotten Tomatoes. Notably, a couple of the revenge thrillers that I reviewed, which have 100% each, which I completely agree with. Then you have this movie. This movie has 25% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's insane to me. Even if you don't like this movie, I don't understand how, in an unbiased way, you cannot honestly give it lower than a 50 or 60%. Because any lower than that, and you're going to have to give me some reasons, because I am not seeing any legitimate reason for this movie to end up with a 25%. Because for that kind of score, that means that not only did a number of people give it higher than that, but quite a few must have given it lower as well. And that is insane to me, because this was a very cool little movie. Now, I'm not saying it's perfect. It definitely doesn't have the kind of depth that other AI movies have had. It kind of tries to sometimes, but it doesn't always have the depth that I think the movie wanted to put across. However, I would put this more into the category of like a popcorn AI movie. It's not trying to necessarily be an Oscar winner, but it does enough with this kind of AI human interface story to make it more than capable of entertaining you for an hour and a half. This is definitely a flick that I would watch more than once, and I found it a lot of fun. I found it emotional in different ways, not to the point of crying, but certainly it invokes different emotions at different points in the film, and partially that's thanks to, of course, Gary Oldman's performance and Micah Monroe as well. But yeah, I really don't get the negativity around this film. The only thing that makes sense to me is that maybe people either don't like Netflix and just gave it a bad score because of that, or maybe they just don't like the cast. Most people probably, as I did, didn't recognise that it was Gary Oldman anyway, and then what have you got left? You've got Micah Monroe and Ed Skrein. If you don't like those two actors, then you might just give it an arbitrary bad score anyway. It wouldn't surprise me if that's what people did, because this movie is not worthy of a 25%. It's double that, at least, even if you dislike it. For me, I would probably put this up around at least a 60 or 70, maybe even a 75%. It's not the greatest thing ever, but it is a lot of fun, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I saw what the movie was going for. There are some predictable things, some not as predictable, but I enjoyed it overall. Now, that's pretty much it as far as my non-spoiler talk. So, of course, if you're not familiar with the film, if you haven't seen it, I would not recommend listening to this section of the video moving forward, but if you've already seen the flick, then of course tell me down below if you agree or disagree with my thoughts, both that I've already said and to follow. So let's get into spoilers. Now, when I was referring to the fact that this movie kind of sometimes aims to be a little bit of a higher plane, you know, like a Her, for instance, with Joaquin Phoenix or something like that, a more thoughtful AI movie rather than, as I said, more of a popcorn AI movie, which is what I would classify this as. I could see some people as thinking the movie was trying to be pretentious, maybe, trying to be cleverer than it actually needed to be or actually was. I could kind of see where you're coming from there, but it definitely didn't ruin the film for me, and I also happen to not really think that the film was trying to shoot for the stars in that respect. To me, this was a movie more about emotion than intelligence, and that kind of goes against the idea of an AI movie most of the time, and I think that's why it might take some people off guard. You might be expecting the movie to have some kind of profound twist, or some kind of world-changing ending, which is what most AI movies try to have. But I don't think this movie was trying to. It was a very deliberately small story. Most of it just takes place in their house, of course. You just got her, the robot, most of the time, and even when Ed Skrein there, it's still only 3 people. So yeah, it's a very small story. As far as stuff which I maybe did or didn't like, well, thinking back, there's plenty that I did like. I loved Gary Oldman's performance. Of course, he was the best part of the film, that goes without saying. But Micah Monroe was great as well. As I said, I enjoyed her and It Follows anyway. Ed Skrein, probably my favourite performance of his, because it was the most restrained. And as far as the location, the house looks stunning as well. So it makes for a very interesting little playground for the acting to happen on. As far as the ending, I had some mixed feelings on that. I wasn't surprised by the ending. But I did find, and this is what I was alluding to earlier on regarding the more emotional aspects of the film, I did find it a little bit sad, maybe even a little tragic in a popcorn kind of way, that the original version of Tao, which did develop a lot more of a personality, is gone. And unless the ending of the film mentions something that I missed, he's always gone. So this is kind of like Tao 2.0, who she's talking to now. And of course, he's already beginning to learn again with that little droid that she's got, the little sentient bot. But yeah, there's just something a little bit tragic about that. It reminded me, without spoiling anything specific, of certain points in Blade Runner 2049, which I would say is a better movie than this, but if you've seen Blade Runner, I think you know what I'm talking about, with regards to a certain female character in that movie, which was tragic, I thought, and I loved it. I actually love, on a slight tangent, but definitely tied into this, I love, in fact, I kind of adore tragic AI stories. When you have this, not necessarily romance, but it tends to be that, where an AI develops a need for an organic life form and is then denied it. There's something poetic about that. I really enjoy it. It's almost like the modern equivalent of the Greek tragedies, because it's with AI instead of organic life forms. And I like that. I think it's cool. It kind of, it factors emotions into a situation that don't really have them, and most often wouldn't have them, but that's kind of why it's fun. It's the more fancy end, the more fantastical end of sci-fi. And I do enjoy that kind of stuff, and it tends to be smaller movies that aim for that kind of thing. And probably one of the best examples would be something like The Iron Giant. It's a kids' movie, but it still plays on that kind of theme. And it's a very, very good movie. So, yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Do you agree with my points? Do you disagree? Did you find yourself more in the 25% Rotten Tomato range? I mean, if you are, please tell me why down below, because I honestly do not understand why somebody would hate this movie that much. Even if you don't enjoy the movie, I don't see any reason to dislike it that heavily. Because for me, with most movies, I either don't like them or I do like them. But then to me, there's a third level to that. There's like, don't like, dislike. And to me, don't like is just kind of neutral. For me, most movies are either neutral or I like them. For me to dislike a movie, it has to be a really bad flick. You know, I've watched some awful movies and I dislike them, but that's because they're so bad. You know, horrendous cinematography, or some awful acting, you know, a ridiculous story. This to me didn't do any of those unforgivable sins, so I really don't get that score. So yeah, tell me down below if you enjoyed this one or not. Tell me your thoughts, and of course, stick around on the channel for more. I cover a lot of sci-fi related stuff, a lot of thrillers, and a lot of horror as well. Those tend to be the three that I cover the most. And of course, until next time, I'll see you then. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.